If we asked you your favorite MCU project, what would it be? See, that's the wonderful thing about being a Marvel fan. Every single MCU project has its own separate fan base, even if it's objectively not great. We're looking at you, Love and Thunder. Phases 3 and 4 gave us some of the best titles in the superhero genre, and today we're ranking our top picks, from worst to best. So let's get started. Before we begin, we're dividing the two phases, and here's why. Phases 3 and 4 deal with completely different storylines. With Phase 3, the MCU concluded Thanos' quest for the Infinity Gauntlet, thus ending the Infinity Saga, and Phase 4 is just the beginning of the Multiverse Saga, ending with the arrival of Kang the Conqueror. So comparing one phase with the other seems a bit unfair, and that's why we're ranking Phase 3 first, before moving on to Phase 4. Starting with Captain Marvel. We hate that it's at the bottom of our Phase 3 lineup, but that doesn't mean it's a terrible movie. For an origin story, it does a pretty good job, but the visual style and overall screenplay are a bit bland. If you're doing a 90s throwback, Nirvana's Come As You Are and a blockbuster cameo aren't gonna cut it. Plus, we feel like Jude Law's talents were wasted as Jan Rog, as he's one of the more forgettable villains in the MCU. But we absolutely adored the performances of Ben Mendelsohn and Lashana Lynch, who played some of the most interesting characters so far. And of course, let's not forget the scene stealer, Goose the Flurkin. Now for Spider-Man Far From Home and Homecoming. We're bunching these two together because they suffer from the same issues. Let's start with Far From Home first, because we rank it a bit lower than Homecoming. And the reason why is Edith, the high-tech sunglasses that Tony passed down to his protege Peter, and he just gives it to a complete stranger, Quentin Beck. That was just weird, and that's why we bumped it down our list. The visuals, action sequences, and emotional weight of the movie were fantastic though. We loved Jake Gyllenhaal's almost manic portrayal of Mysterio. Overall, Far From Home is a great MCU movie, but it isn't as good as Homecoming. One of the more brilliant villains we've seen yet is Adrian Toomes, played to perfection by Michael Keaton. We knew why he did what he did, and he didn't have to be a cosmic being to be downright terrifying. On the other hand, Tony Stark sort of took the spotlight from Peter. We know he was his mentor and showed him the ropes, but he didn't really need to be in the movie in our opinion. But Homecoming's saving grace was when Peter goes up against Toomes in a homemade suit and wins. That's what made him such a fan favorite and proved why he deserved to be an Avenger. Up next is Thor Ragnarok. The first Thor movie wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. But after The Dark World, even Chris Hemsworth became bored of the character, and that's when Taika Waititi walked in. Ragnarok was more similar to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 than it was to any other movie in Phase 3, and that's the best thing that could have happened to Thor. Waititi made sure that the God of Thunder was literally the God of Thunder by the end. Aside from a few pacing issues, the movie was a gorgeous mishmash of colors and synthwave from start to finish. Every character felt fresh and unique to the MCU, including the Grandmaster and the villain, Hela. Although we felt that Hela could have been a more compelling villain, because her character felt one-dimensional. Overall, Ragnarok solidified Thor's position as a badass Norse god, with a great sense of humor. Coming up is Black Panther. Almost every performance in this movie was a standout, but we particularly loved Chadwick Boseman, Denai Guerrera, Daniel Kaluuya, and of course, Michael B. Jordan. Killmonger's easily one of the most complex and compelling villains in the MCU yet, because he was able to do what most villains can't: change the protagonist's perspective. The movie won 3 Academy Awards, and nearly every fan ranks it in their top 5 lists. If we had to nitpick, it'd be the final battle between T'Challa and Killmonger. The cinematography for that sequence and the CGI are some of the worst we've seen. But we understand that a bunch of overworked VFX artists worked a crunch schedule and did the best they could, and it doesn't distract us from the emotional stakes, so no harm done. Finally, Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. Like Spider-Man, we're counting these two as one, and they're our top picks for Phase 3. We're putting Endgame first, not because it's somehow less than Infinity War. On the contrary, it's one of the greatest and most ambitious superhero films ever made yet. The amount of fan service the Russo brothers were able to cram into a 3-hour runtime blew our minds. The visuals and action set pieces were second to none. But then, there's the issue of Thanos. He basically turned into a generic supervillain that we've seen time and time again, even though he was still the Mad Titan, he wasn't the same version we'd seen in Infinity War. So when he didn't recognize Scarlet Witch and why she was coming after him, we felt a little let down. But we forgot all about it when Cap lifted Mjolnir and beat Thanos' purple butt with it. And as for Infinity War, there's only one reason we're ranking it above all the others: the Mad Titan's quest for the Infinity Stones. As you know, it was basically Thanos' movie, with the others serving as supporting characters. It was his mad dash to the finish line, and no one could stop him, not even Thor. But what makes it special is that it ended like no other Marvel movie. The bad guy won, and we understood why. We knew his motivations, and Josh Brolin sold us on the idea that we need fewer people in the universe. Next is Phase 4, and we'll start with the Disney Plus shows. We are doing something a little bit different here. Instead of a worst to best approach, we are categorizing the Disney series into great and not so great. First up, the not so great. For a Disney Plus series that didn't work as well as we'd hoped they would, we're picking 3: Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Moon Knight, and Ms. Marvel. All 3 of them suffer from the same third act problem. They begin with a breakneck pace and build up to a highly anticipated finale, only to slow down in the 5th episode. Seriously, take a look at the 5th episode of each series, and you'll notice the pace slows to a crawl. It breaks away from the overall narrative for more character-driven subplots. While that's completely okay, it'd only work in a movie. On the other hand, all 3 of them were critically acclaimed for involving social commentary in their narratives. Falcon examined the US's deliberate erasure of African American contributions to history in the form of Isaiah Bradley. And both Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel introduced some of the most interesting characters in the MCU. Iman Vellani's performance as Kamala Khan is a standout in Phase 4, and the inclusion of both Egyptian and Pakistani culture and folklore gets top marks from us. Up next, the Great Series. Our favorite Disney Plus series so far are Loki, WandaVision, and What If. Loki and WandaVision kicked off Phase 4, and not only exceeded fans' expectations, but gave them a much-needed change of pace after Endgame. While they still suffer from the third act problem, they make up for it by introducing some of the most interesting villains we've seen yet. As for What If, it featured a range of possible storylines in each episode, and every episode just kept getting better. Everyone has their favorite, and ours is What If Zombies. If the MCU was missing anything, it was an animated series featuring the most ludicrous storylines imaginable. Coming up are the movies, the worst being Eternals and Thor: Love and Thunder. What can we say about these two that hasn't been said already? The Eternals was a letdown because it felt like a rough cut. The overall narrative and pacing were atrocious, and the chemistry between Icarus and Cersei was lukewarm at best. However, the visuals of a giant six-eyed celestial rising out of the ocean are pretty gorgeous. As for Love and Thunder, we expected more. Thor basically becomes a himbo throughout the movie, with Valkyrie basically carrying the plot until the final act. And then there's the CGI, the pacing, and the missed opportunity with gore. It was just not a great Marvel movie, and ruined its potential. Thor had a great butt scene though. Finally, the best Phase 4 movies so far, Shang-Chi and Spider-Man No Way Home. We loved Shang-Chi for several reasons, the least of which are its gorgeous visuals and creature designs. Just like Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel, the movie explored ancient Chinese culture and folklore, bringing representation to the forefront of an all-Asian cast. The fight sequences were inspired by classic Jackie Chan and wuxia movies, including Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's one of the best Marvel movies to come around in a long time, just like No Way Home. No Way Home's darker tone, emotional stakes, and fan service were right up there with Endgame. Willem Dafoe's unhinged Green Goblin will go down as one of the best villains in the MCU ever, and seeing Tobey and Andrew reprise their Spider-Man roles was the icing on a beautifully layered cake. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. So do you agree with our list? Did we miss any? Tell us down below. And as always, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our upcoming Marvel videos. Till next time,